Good evening. Welcome to Prophecy Roundtable. We are back. Yeah, we had a couple issues. So Scott got to do some hunting, which is awesome, and he did not have very good reception. And when he was in America, I was out for the count. I had the craziest sickness. It was like the flu, and then it was RSV after that, and I don't know, was it COVID as well? I don't know, but I felt pretty crappy. I'm mostly better, and every time I say that, my cough comes back, but I'm getting there. So I'm excited. Tonight we are going to jump into Revelation chapter 12. This is the child who's caught up to God. We're going to take a look at the identity of this child, try to understand from Scripture itself who this might be, what it means for us today as believers, and how we can apply it to our lives. So, Scott, it's good to see you again.
Good to see you. You were just saying, how long has it been? We only missed 2 shows, but we only had 1 show before we missed a show before that. So
that's right. Yeah, because that one time I was out. I could not. Yeah, it would not have been very fun. So, all right. Well, as always, guys, if you have questions, comments, please put them in the chat. We'll do our best to get to them. Well, let's just jump right in. All right. Now a great sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and on her head a garland of 12 stars. Then being with child, she cried out in labor and in pain to give birth. And another sign appeared in heaven. Behold, a great fiery dragon having 7 heads and 10 horns, and 7 diadems on his heads. If you'll continue.
Oh, okay. Let me remember.
Verse 6.
I have to switch over to the screen because I'm on my little laptop.
There you go. His tail drew a third of the stars of heaven and threw them to the earth, and the dragon stood before the woman who was ready to give birth to devour her child as soon as it was born. She bore a male child who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron, and her child was caught up to God and his throne. Then the woman fled into the wilderness, where she was as a place prepared by God that they should feed her there 1,260 days. All right, we'll stop there for a second.
Okay.
All right. So this is, 11 and 12 are the middle parts of the book. We looked at the 2 witnesses last time. And now the focus, because the 2 witnesses are dead, at least as far as the book of Revelation is concerned, they're gone. And now we're looking at a different theme. We're looking at this child. We're going to look at the dragon in just a moment. But we first have to identify this child. And there have been
Let's talk about the woman first.
Okay, let's start there.
I think before we talk about the child, I think we need to know who the child's mother is.
I completely agree with you. I think that makes a lot of sense.
And we obviously you were around. I don't think we really knew each other back in 2017 when people were pontificating, and some were actually dogmatically stating that the alignment in the stars that year in 2017, I forget the exact date, in September or October. Yep. But I mean, the pattern did fit. My buddy Curtis at River Branch, you know, he went sort of like we did this last September or whatever, where we went on the day before. Well, he did a teaching like the Saturday before this date. He says, you know, the rapture is not happening on this date. He got so much pushback for it, but you know, I mean, obviously he ended up being correct. So,
well, you don't have to be, I mean, not to throw him under the bus, but you don't have to be a genius to figure out that 99.999% of all of these predictions turn out to be nothing burgers. And look, I want Jesus to return as much as the next person, but
well, and it could have been significant. I mean, I've heard some very good arguments about that was the sign of the woman. It was the sign of, you know, and a lot of people are paralleling it back to in Egypt, where there was 7 years of plenty and 7 years of famine. And, you know, in spite of COVID, you know, the economy still did good. Nobody, you know, it wasn't that bad. I wouldn't exactly call 2020, 2021 years of plenty when you had to stay in your house in certain states. But
yeah, it definitely screwed a lot of things up.
But things haven't been good so far in in 25, as far as at least economically for the middle class and lower class in America. Mm-hmm. So anyway, there was let's see, the Revelation 12 sign. I'll put it up here.
Yeah. So this great sign appears in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, the moon under her feet. This takes us back to Genesis chapter 37, verse 9, where, remember, Joseph is having a bunch of dreams, and he says, hey, bros, guess what? First I had all of our sheaves were in the field, and all of yours bowed down to mine. They get mad at him for that. And then he says, hey, I had another dream. The sun, moon, and stars all bowed down to me. And his dad, Jacob, gets a little bit annoyed by this dream because he's like, son, what are you talking about? Am I and your mother and your brothers all going to bow down to you? Like, come on, let's be real. Well, of course they did eventually, but that is the imagery that Revelation seems to be pulling from. It's identifying who this woman is. The woman is all of Israel, not only the Jewish people, but it's all of Israel, all 12 tribes, all of Jacob. And, I think it's very clear when you look at Genesis chapter 37, because that really identifies it. Would you see anything else there?
No, I mean, I'm certainly not. I don't take the Roman Catholic position that it's Mary.
Yeah.
And so, and I don't take the position that the majority of our dispensational brothers might. They would be applying just the Jewish people to this man child. So I think we're in 100% alignment
to the woman, right?
On this issue that this is the Israel as the woman, the bride.
Yeah.
And I don't want to say the bride, but it's certainly all of Israel. So,
well, because she's going to give birth to this child, right?
This child, so correct.
The child is coming from her. So if we can first identify who she is, that this is Israel at large. It includes a lot of Jews, no doubt about that, but it's not exclusively Jewish. It's the larger Commonwealth of Israel. It's all Israel that we can really understand here.
And I would say right now it's everybody in covenant, whether they realize they're Israel or not.
Mm-hmm.
They're Israel. And if anybody's been watching us long enough knows we're not talking about the church replacing Israel. Right. I don't even like the term the church. I like the term we're of the house of Israel, the whole house of Israel, not just the northern kingdom, the combined kingdom that we see in after the new covenant is made to both the house of Israel and the house of Judah. Then you see a combined kingdom when that new covenant is, realized. You see that there's no longer any distinction. It just talks about Israel again. You don't see Ephraim being prominent or Joseph or Judah. And those were the three, I guess, shorthand terms for who predominates in Genesis and throughout the history of Israel. So until Israel gets they're conquered and scattered, and then we don't hear from them anymore.
Right. And what I talk about in God's divorce is that Israel is the woman, like she is the bride. And unfortunately, along came dispensationalism, along came the Roman Catholic Church, etc. And they basically said Israel, aka the Jews, are out. And now the church has replaced it. And it's funny because the dispensationalists and the Roman Catholic Church at large basically do the same thing. They both put the Jewish people in some theological ghetto over there, while the church is the main stage. Yeah, that's definitely Doug Krieger's verbiage there. But it so they slice it a little differently, but it's the same cake basically. It's what I'm arguing sorry?
It's like dispensationalism would be temporary replacement theology.
Exactly.
Like essentially the Jews, who they believe is all Israel, which is not, they put them over on this shelf, like in the freezer. They're in the freezer for this 2,000 year period of time.
Yeah.
And Yah can't multitask. Apparently, he can't deal
Yeah.
with Jews and the church, and he can't
Right.
deal with Israel and the church. So he, after he's done dealing with the church, and we get raptured and we get to go marry Jesus, then the Father God's going to beat the snot out of his bride. I mean,
Oh my God.
and when you, I mean,
Oh.
when you boil it down to that, and you realize like that's that's disgusting. It turns God, who is one, into a bigamist,
Mm-hmm.
and you've got
Mm-hmm.
two. It's separation theology.
It
It's
really is. Yeah.
it keeps
Well,
it keeps the church separate from Israel.
and this is what got us connected in the first place, is that I had been talking about God's divorce way back then, and I finally wrote the book on it. But looking at who is Israel is incredibly important. And there's a lot of people who say, well, it doesn't really matter, I'm just the church, or when it comes to the end times, who really cares, we're just going to talk about this, that, and the other. It matters everything, because if we don't know who the bride is, if we're rather confused about that, then we're going to start giving different roles and assignments to somebody that the Bible really isn't talking about. So this is incredibly significant. We have to understand that God and Israel, they go into marriage covenant at Mount Sinai. That marriage covenant is the old covenant. That marriage went sour and went south because Israel was not faithful. And eventually God says to the broken northern kingdom, to the 10 tribes, he says, you're not my people. I'm not your God. We're done. We're over. Here's your certificate of divorce. And he sends her away. She then goes, hangs out with Baal, Ashtoreth, Molech, etc. And then she says, gosh, I'd love to go back to my first husband. But this is the divine dilemma. The law says, can't do that, sweetheart. It would greatly pollute the land. And this is where the husband, Yeshua, has to then come, because there's only one escape clause. The only escape clause is if the husband dies. Then she can be free from the stipulations of that divorce certificate, because the covenant died with him. And now there's place for a new covenant. This is why we keep talking about this, because it's everything. If you can get that concept, then
the
you can
gospel of
get
the
it. And again, if you haven't seen it yet, God's divorce, I want to encourage you guys. I've had people that are telling me I'm buying it by the dozen or 20 at a time, and they're giving it out to their friends and family, because it's saying it in such a way that it's not threatening. This isn't now polemic, but it's just going back and say, what if the gospel is not about starting something new, but about restoring something ancient?
Restoring a
And you can
relationship.
contextualize the whole Bible with this understanding. Then when we get to Revelation, it's not God. This is what Pastor Chuck Smith used to say. God bless him. He was a great guy. He used to say that the tribulation is God pouring out his wrath on a Christ rejecting world. And it sounded right at the time, but now I look back and I'm like, wait, so God is just ticked off and he's just like, I'm gonna get you guys. And it becomes this horror fest. And we kind of get a little bit excited about it, because God's going to finally give it to them. Not us, because we're the church. We're the bride of Christ. But no, it just gives you a whole different context for how all of this comes together. So here in Revelation 12, we're getting kind of our first glimpse, if you will, of this main character, aka the woman. And she's very important. We're going to see that.
All right. The second verse. Then, being with child, she cried out in labor and in pain to give to give birth. And so, again, we see this this analogy of I'm going to go back in just a second because somebody just put it up, but we see this analogy of birth travails and how that's what the birth pangs, the tribulation, and how the woman is happy after she's went through the birth pangs. She's birthed all her children and everything. And then go ahead and give your thoughts on that. You probably agree, but I'm going to pull up Isaiah 66. I just can't do it as quickly as I normally can.
Yeah. So there was a promise, obviously, if you were a believer, we all know that there was this amazing promise that God would send the Messiah. He's the one who was talked about in Genesis 3:15. He is the promised seed that had to come through a very specific line. He's the seed that the enemy Satan was trying to disrupt all these years. I mean, the promise of the Messiah is the story of redemption. It's that thread that is running through the entire Bible, and that there would be this child. We, of course, know about this child in Isaiah 53. I mean, this is, everybody knows this passage. It's classic, okay? Right? But unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given. That's obviously, I know, 7:14. I know. But it talks about this child who would come, this man of sorrows who would come, and that he would be the one who would then bear our griefs and carry our sorrows, stricken by God. So the Bible is a little bit cryptic, to be clear, but that there is this promised child, this promised seed, this Messiah who would come, that's everywhere. And of course, it becomes much more obvious in hindsight than it does looking forward. When we look back, we can see it all over the place. But when we are, if we were back there looking forward, it would have been a little trickier to kind of figure that out, right?
All right. The reason I wanted to go back to Isaiah 66, and I'm not going to read the whole passage, Doug, but I want to, it draws into, and I know it's a minority position, but as I say, thus says Yah, heaven is my throne, earth is my footstool. Where is the house that you will build for me, or that you will build me? Where is the place of my rest? For all those things my hand has made, and all those things exist, says Yah. But on this one I will look, on him who was poor and of a contrite spirit, and who trembles at my word. I don't want to get up on a tangent, but Yeshua is the word of God. He's the word made flesh. And I do believe this relates to any future temple or sacrifices that Judah may do, because although they may have vast respect for the Torah, they don't have respect for the Torah, the word made flesh. So he kills a bull as if he slays a man, he who sacrifices the lamb as if he breaks a dog's neck, he who offers a grain offering as if he offers swine's blood, he who burns incense as if he blesses an idol. Just as they have chosen their own ways and their soul delights in their abominations, so will I choose their delusions and bring their fears on them. Because when I called, no one answered. When I spoke, they did not hear, but they did evil before my eyes and chose that in which I do not delight. And the reason I read the first four is to set this up. Hear the word of the Lord, you who tremble at his word. So these are going to be those that are currently in covenant. These are going to be those that are of Judah, who are attached to the tree. They have accepted Yeshua. They have placed their faith in him. They understand he is the Messiah. They are no longer divorced and out of, or widowed and out of covenant. Your brethren who hated you. And again, we do have that we know that ends in Isaiah 11, I believe, Doug, when the animosity and the jealousy and the vexing between Ephraim. Right. And you know, it is, I mean, I know passions are tense right now and it's going to get even worse with the true anti-Jewishness, not what we've been taught as anti-Semitic, but true, like hating the local Jew down the street who's just a doctor or a lawyer or, you know, has nothing to do with politics, has nothing to do, or the local person that attends a synagogue. But there is some hatred, there is some exclusion here. In other words, I've listened to it, and I can understand why if somebody is only listening to the vile stuff that some of the rabbis put out, that
very, very small minority.
Yeah, it's a small minority. Right. It's very racial. But there's one or two guys in Israeli politics right now. I won't say their names, but yeah, some of their statements, they're just as racist as any Nazi ever thought about being. But who cast you out for my name's sake. And so again, your brethren who hated you, who cast you out. And again, it's back in when I don't like to say when the church was founded, but back when the new covenant was recognized. In other words, there was persecution of Peter and Paul and James and Jude. They were cast out of the synagogues. Let the Lord be glorified. that we may see your joy, but they shall be ashamed. The sound and noise from the city, a voice from the temple. I'm drawing some Malachi allusions here. The voice of Yah, who fully repays his enemies. And this is how it relates to the man-child. Before she was in labor, she gave birth. Before her pain came, she delivered a male child, a man-child. Who has heard such a thing? Who has seen such things? Shall the earth be made to give birth in one day, or shall a nation be born at once? For as soon as Zion was in labor, she gave birth to her children. Shall I bring to the time of birth and not cause delivery, says Yah? Shall I who cause delivery shut at the womb, says your Elohim? Rejoice with Jerusalem and be glad with all her, all you who love her. Rejoice for joy with her, all you who mourn for her. And so the reason I believe that's relevant to the man-child, I'll go back to Revelation 12, is that's the only passage I'm aware of in which I believe just John is not, he's not making up new things. He's always drawing from the prophets.
Right.
So she cried out in labor and pain to give birth. And so that I do think that's a parallel passage, and that there is going to be this birth as we go down further before the tribulation of this man-child who will be that governing authority. That's the rod of iron. In other words, the man-child, and I've got a few notes here, but that the man-child, just as Yeshua was given authority by the Father to rule, you can't get around the verbiage, and I'm no Greek scholar, but you can't get around the language. He is going to give to the man-child. The man-child is the rod of iron, and so that's why, So anyway, that's where that's my current understanding. I know I'm in the minority. Tony Robinson has a great. For anybody that wants to look at it, he's got a great, I think, 12-part YouTube series. He's got several Substack articles on this where he just really breaks it down. Steve Mutria also has a similar understanding that I do. So this is, but I don't know that I started having this understanding from hearing them. This might be one of the few things that it was more just from a study, like what's going on with this and comparing it to Psalm 2, and comparing it to Revelation 2 and comparing it to Revelation 19. In other words, Yeshua is no doubt the King of Kings. But
so I mean, when we think about the man-child, the basic interpretations have been that it's Jesus. That's the more traditional interpretation.
There's been no other interpretation.
I know, but obviously some have come along and over time. Then some think it's the church. Some think the man-child is the end time overcomers, which is a very charismatic or prophetic readings kind of idea. And then Israel's remnant, which some historicists have read it that way as well.
And I would say, I believe it's going to be perhaps the 144,000. In other words, it's going to be those who have overcome even before this tribulation. They're not going to need, the tribulation is for the church. The two witnesses are going to be testifying to the church as much as they are to those who are not in covenant.
Yeah. Well, so let's look at the text here, because obviously every time we talk about something, we want to go back to the text. So if you could go up just a little bit so we can see through verse 5. So another sign appeared in heaven, this great fiery dragon. We know that's Satan. If you guys have questions, check out Corrupting the Image Volume 2. All right, he took a third of his his tail, drew a third of the stars and threw them to the earth. Basically we think that Satan has a third of the angels, and the dragon stood before the woman who was ready to give birth to devour her child as soon as it was born. I mean, the imagery here of Herod sending out his soldiers to kill Jesus, during the whole nativity thing, it certainly has very strong echoes that he tried to destroy Jesus, not only, I would suggest, at Jesus' birth, but even before his birth. I think we could even throw in there Genesis chapter 6, when, Satan being armed with this prophecy that God gave, that it would be the seed of the woman that would step on his head. I've, of course, made the argument in Corrupting the Image series that he was trying to corrupt the image, and he was trying to debase, destroy, corrupt the genetic markers that God had placed in us, and to put in a counterfeit seed, and that's the whole Nephilim thing. And so I think we could certainly see echoes of it there. But here the woman is ready to give birth, right? So she's pregnant, and this baby's coming, right? It's not like she's in her 5th month, but she's in her 9th month, and she's in the last days of that 9th month, and she is ready for this little package to come out. All right, so he's there, he's ready to devour it, but then she gives birth to a male child.
Let's stop for a second though, because the language, and I've looked at several translations. I mean, we can pull up the Greek word, but the Greek word implies immediacy. Like, in other words, Yeshua is born, and the dragon through Herod is immediately there ready to devour Yeshua, and that was not the case. And so,
I don't know. I mean, when we're looking at something that's going to happen immediately in the Bible, even a couple years is still pretty fast.
Well, I believe that this man-child will be immediate, like as soon as the Great Tribulation starts, before the travail, back to Isaiah 66. So again, that is a parallel that that applies more to Moses, which we know it's not Moses. We know this male child is not Moses because he's dead.
Right. So let's look at verse 5, because I think that will really help us to understand who this child is. She gave birth to a male child who is to rule all the nations with a rod of iron, but her child was caught up to God and to his throne. So I don't know. I mean, right there, if we go back to Psalm 2, verse 9, you shall break them with a rod of iron, you shall dash them to pieces with the with the potter's vessel. I mean, it's Jesus who's going to rule the nation.
Exactly, but
we're going to rule with him. Granted, we get to sit on his throne with him, but he's the one who gets us into the party.
First of all, I'm not making myself out to be man-child material. Okay, I think this is going to be people that have truly overcome, truly are walking in repentance, and it's going to be. This is not going to be all that are in covenant. This is going to be, I mean, I would say it's going to be those that are, have the testimony of Yeshua and keeping his commandments before the tribulation. In other words, they don't necessarily need refining. It's because, again, I can go back. I'll just read Revelation. I'll pull up Revelation 2 on my phone and read it.
Well, before you go there, before you go to 2:27, go to 19:15.
Okay, I know that, but 2:27 interprets 19, but I'll go to that one first.
I think 19:15, he himself will rule them with a rod of iron.
Okay, see, again, he's not going to be sitting up there with a big old scepter or a big old club.
Well, nobody's taking this that he has to hold a piece of metal. But he's the one who has the authority. He's the one who has the ability to rule and reign, and we are simply, sub helpers. Okay.
Well, again, my point is, Revelation is a book of signs.
Yeah, verse 15.
What is 15? Okay.
Yeah, but so for out of his mouth comes a sharp sword with which to strike down the nations, and he will rule them with a rod of iron. So, that's word for word that we have this as being applied to Jesus.
No, that's no doubt Yeshua. He's ruling with something, with a rod of iron, and that's where I'll go back to Revelation 2 real quick.
Okay, 2:27.
And so again, there's no other way to read this, and I think when we covered this, this is how I read it. I'm gonna put Doug in here because I don't want to even so. Doug who conquers and Doug who keeps my works until the end. To Doug, I will give authority over the nations, and Doug will rule them with a rod of iron, as when earthen pots are broken in pieces, even as I, Yeshua, myself have received authority from my Father. So again, this these overcomers, those who have, this is in Thyatira, it's the fourth church chiastically. This is the center theme of the seven churches.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to, but to the rest of you in Thyatira who do not hold to this teaching, who have not learned what some call the deep things of Satan, to you I say, I do not lay on you any other burden. Only hold fast to what you have until I come. The one who conquers and keeps my works until then, to him, to Doug, I will give authority over the nations. And Doug, well, this is not, and Yeshua will rule. To Yeshua, to myself, I will give authority. To myself, I will rule with them with a rod of iron. So again, I don't know why this is not hard, or I don't know why this is not hard to understand. I understand why in Revelation 12, we can go back there.
No, what I think you're doing though is I think you are
using consistency in syllables.
No, I think you're moving the goalposts.
No.
Yes.
Okay, look. So who rules with a rod of iron?
Jesus.
Okay, right.
I mean, Jesus.
But what
we have it in Psalm chapter 2. Very clearly, it's talking about the Son. We have it in Revelation 19, word for word. And then what he's doing is he's inviting us to rule with him. We see that in Revelation 20, that we're going to rule and reign with Jesus. We see it in Daniel chapter 7. The one who comes on the clouds, to him is given the authority and the dominion. And then we're going to join in that. So it's a horse and a cart issue, and I think you're putting the cart before the horse.
I disagree. I'm being consistent with the interpretation, and I don't think.
I disagree with you. I think you're putting.
I know that. You knew we would differ on this, but I don't see Yeshua sitting up there with a big old.
But I don't know why you keep bringing that up, because you don't see us having a big old rod of iron, right? So let's take your logic in Revelation chapter 2 that the overcomer is going to rule with a rod of iron. Does that mean that we are going to have pieces of metal in our hands?
It's a symbol.
Okay, then it's the same thing with Jesus. It's a symbol of him having the authority, him having the sole right.
We're not arguing about
and then he shares that. I know. I'm not arguing with you. I'm excited about this topic because I really think that you're getting the horse and the cart mixed up. And I think you keep putting the cart before the horse, and it's Jesus. And then we're following. Okay. That's the order here.
So answer me this then. Did Mary or Judah flee to the wilderness immediately after Yeshua was born?
Well, no, I mean, this is a cosmic worldview of what's happening. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that's going on in this chapter, but this is sort of the 35,000 foot view of history and redemption history and what the enemy is doing. Again, we agree that there's a lot of symbolic language that's happening here. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to say, okay, who is the woman? We went back to Genesis 37.
Israel.
And I think we both properly identified her as
Israel going through the Great Tribulation when Yeshua was born.
Well, okay, so Israel is the one who gives birth to Yeshua, granted.
Right, but was she going through Great Tribulation was my question.
Well, no, because that's not even in the text yet. She's not going to be in tribulation until after she gives birth to this child.
But
which
she was pregnant, crying out in birth pains and the agony of giving birth, and we have all the text talking about how comparing the Great Tribulation to birth pangs and to the contractions, and I've never given birth, so I don't know what it's like. But I have no doubt that Mary gave birth. But we've already agreed, and most commentators agree that the woman is all of Israel.
Yes.
At the time of Yeshua, you had, when he was born, only Judah was in covenant, and the northern tribes were out of covenant, had been divorced, were scattered to the nations. And so again, I don't think, that doesn't fit. If we're going to say that this is Israel versus Mary, then we know that the Great Tribulation it's at least been 1995-ish years since Mary gave birth to Yeshua.
I mean,
I'm just pointing out the things that don't fit it being Yeshua.
Well, I mean, okay, again, a part of this depends on how precisely we want to take these prophecies, all right, and the imagery. If we're going to say the woman, if we're going to start focusing on Mary and the actual very physical event of pushing out a baby from her body, well, that takes on a whole different context. That's where the Catholics, we would argue that the Catholics get way too focused on the actual very mother who brought forth Jesus. But if we're looking at a nation as a whole, and I think again we identified the woman as Israel, well, Israel isn't, I mean, obviously we're taking this symbolically, right? And Israel, the nation, or whatever was manifesting there when Jesus came around, wasn't pregnant, right? I mean,
No, no,
there
no, no.
wasn't like a bump in her tummy,
We agree on
but
that,
she did bring forth, Israel as a whole did
but
bring forth the
but
Messiah.
not during the time of this great tribulation that Yeshua talks about, that the prophets talk about. That is not until the end of the age. That's my point.
Well, I don't think you can apply tribulation only to the great tribulation here. I mean, that she was pregnant, she was crying out in pain. That was all happening in the first century. There's no question about that. We know that she was not happy. The Romans were there. There was a lot of angst. There was a lot of messianic expectation. And times are tough. I mean, okay, it wasn't the great tribulation. It wasn't the Antichrist running around, but man, people were getting crucified left and right. It was a tough
Okay.
time to be alive. And if you get crucified, that's a pretty lousy tribulation-ish way to go. Again, I think you're trying to nitpick when it serves your point.
Okay,
And
no,
then
no, no.
you
I'm
get
not
all
nitpicking. I'm
fuzzy when
going.
it doesn't.
Okay. Do you believe that at this time, back around, let's just call it 2-ish BC, 3-ish BC? Do you believe that that's when the dragon swept a third of the stars to heaven and cast them to earth?
No, no, because it doesn't have to be read like that. It doesn't mean that
Okay.
he had to do it at that moment, but this can be a general description, which is called a predicate, that this is a description of who he is and what he's like. We see this. I wrote a paper on this of Revelation chapter 20, the one from whom heaven and earth fled away. It doesn't mean that the moment that Jesus or John sees this happening that's when heaven and earth fled away. Rather, it becomes a descriptor. It's a verbal descriptor, almost like a participle. It's a verbal descriptor of what this person has done. Okay, if I say I saw a guy in the market the other day, you're like, well, what was he wearing? Like, I don't know, but the guy that's on that TV show. All right, that becomes now a descriptor of who he is. I can't remember what he was wearing or exactly what he was doing, but I know he's famous because I saw him on such and such a show, right? And that's basically what's happening here. This is the dragon who has a third of the stars, who's cast them to the earth in Revelation 20, the one who from whose face heaven and earth fled away. That's definitely Jesus, because we see that in so many other places, that when he does come, we're going to have the opening of the very heavens themselves. Okay, so it's a descriptor of who he is. Now, in the English tends to flatten things. Well, any translation tends to flatten things, and it's not as robust. So I don't think that's really I don't think that's a strong argument.
And I would differ, because you're wanting to say that, again, and I get it, as far as I believe this chapter is chronological. Okay, you don't, obviously, because otherwise.
Well, we have recapitulation after recapitulation.
I understand that for overall the thematic view, but I believe I agree with Tony, actually, that this is the fulcrum. This is in the chiastic structure, that this compares and relates all the way back to Genesis 3, and where you've got a woman and you've got a serpent, and it talks about childbirth, and it talks about this is the sort of the fulcrum of this entire biblical story. I mean, obviously it fleshes out on the front end, on the back end, and we get more details, but I do believe this is from a chiastic view, that if there's 7, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, this would be 7. As
So
far as
so tell me, who is Israel? Or excuse me, who's the woman?
Israel,
Okay, and so who's the child?
the male child.
Yeah, that one.
I've already told you. I believe it's the 144,000. It's those that are mentioned back in Revelation 2.
And why doesn't he use like plural or something?
Again, going back to Isaiah 66, where it says that there will be a child brought
But
forth, a male
okay,
child brought forth before tribulation. So again, I've got a witness from the prophets, and I
but
don't think anybody.
in Revelation 2:27, you said that it's anybody, Doug, for example,
Well, I
who
was using you as
overcomes.
an
You were
example.
saying that I'm one of the overcomers and I'm
No.
going to rule with a rod of iron.
Mhm.
I'm definitely not one of the 144,000. I
You don't
don't
know that.
qualify. Okay. I do
Why
not
not?
qualify.
Why?
Um, well, I'm definitely not a virgin. Okay. I mean,
Well, see,
that's too late.
we would differ
Um,
on that too. So
well, I don't know
true.
why. I think the language is abundantly clear
When
that
we get there,
they are they're virgins.
we
And
can
I
have
don't
fun
know
with
why
that one
a
too.
virgin just can't be a virgin and just take it as that. I just think you're obfuscating all this stuff. And instead of just being happy with the traditional interpretation,
Why would I want to
listen
go
to
with
Tony,
tradition
and
if
then
I
Tony's
believe
got
it's
these
wrong?
weird ideas, and now we're off and I don't know where we are. And so now you have to create an identity for this male child as 144,000, but they're not even necessarily virgins. They might just be anybody who sort of kind of qualifies.
It's
I
spiritual,
don't know. It
man.
just gets all convoluted, man.
We differ on this. You go with the mainstream. I'm sort of in a very very much minority.
You're in quite the niche. I'll say that.
Okay. Well,
But
let's keep going because let's talk about the next verse.
all right,
All
all right.
right. And the woman fled to the wilderness where she
Mm-hmm.
has a place prepared by God in which she is to be nourished. You've already agreed that Mary didn't flee to the wilderness and Israel
I agree
didn't flee to the wilderness.
because I never said it was Mary.
I know that, but I'm
Yeah.
just saying that if we're look, Israel did not flee to the wilderness. We skipped the verse, a big one actually. So she gave birth to a male child, one of Israel nations, but her child was, we didn't deal with this issue yet. Her
Okay.
child was harpazoed,
Yeah.
called up, snatched up to God and to his throne.
Yep.
Yeshua was not harpazoed when he was born to protect him from being devoured by the dragon. Yeshua was actually crucified.
Yeah.
He died. He was in the grave for 3 days and 3 nights. He rose. He ascended gently into the clouds. He was
Okay.
not harpazoed. And let me finish this thought real quick. There are 2 witnesses to a harpazo in the in Acts and in the epistles.
Yeah.
Paul says he was harpazoed to the 3rd heaven. He was actually snatched up, whether in body or spirit, he did not know.
Yeah.
And then I think it was Philip, witness to the eunuch, on his way down to Gaza of all places. And then after he baptized the Ethiopian eunuch, he was harpazoed from one place to another. And he's like, I'm here now. I'll keep on spreading the gospel. And then he made his way up to Caesarea. So again, Yeshua was not harpazoed. He was he ascended into the clouds.
Yeah. Well,
and when it wasn't immediately.
Yeah, and let me point out the word "but." That the "but" makes it sound like, you know, you have this, and then you have this contrast. In the Greek, it just says "and." Okay, and so there's a couple different things going on here. I don't think it's any stretch whatsoever to suggest that when Jesus ascended after his resurrection and he takes his disciples out onto the Mount of Olives and they say, Lord, will you at this time restore the kingdom to Israel? And he says, it's not for you to know the times and the seasons. And then he begins to ascend into the clouds, and then they're all gaping up at the sky, and the angels say, what are you looking at? He's going to come back in the same manner that he left as. So it perfectly fits. I agree with you. It's a different word. It is a different word.
Completely different.
And well, that's true. It is true. It's a different word, but still Jesus was taken up into to God and to his throne. Stephen attests to that when he sees Jesus standing at the right hand of the throne of God in the book of Acts, chapter 7. So again, you're making your argument based on the word harpazo. And
No, not just on harpazo. I mean, again, it's
yeah,
all the arguments I've made up to this point, and I'm not done yet.
yeah.
So it's many reasons.
But I think there's equally valid and if much better counter arguments to those things.
Okay.
I do not think that Tony or you have the strongest arguments here. You have arguments, but I don't think they're the strongest ones. And again, I think this is where the traditional, the early church saw this as Jesus. It doesn't mean that they're right, but you're onto the new tradition versus what the church at large has basically understood this to be.
Hey, man, this is not something I'm staking my eternal kingdom status on.
I know nobody's staking anything here, man. We're just having an academic discussion about who this might be.
Let's get to one we can probably agree on, okay?
Okay.
And the woman fled into the wilderness where she has a place prepared by God in which she is to be nourished for 1,260 days. Now, we all know we both agree the woman is Israel.
Yeah.
Maybe you believe it's just Judah in this. You tell me, but I do believe that when the Great Tribulation starts, this 1,260-day period, this 3.5-year period, that there will be protection for for Israel. So
I'm not super dogmatic on this one. I will go back to Matthew 24, where Jesus says, when you see the abomination of desolation as spoken of by Daniel the prophet, get out of town. Don't go back and get your clothes. Don't go back and get your coat. Get out immediately. So the language does seem to be centered around Jerusalem.
It does.
And, that they might go to Petra or Selah or
ancient Moab.
Yeah. There's another one. It means sheepfold, and I'm blanking on the name right now.
Oh, Bozrah.
Bozrah. That they might go there again. I think those are very likely candidates. I'm not dogmatic on those,
and that would be for those in that area, or maybe even some of the Christians that are in Jordan, or some of there's very much minority, but I think if when this event happens, I think the whole world will see it. Yeah. And I do believe in that there will be leaders during this time period that will be told what to do. If you know someone that you've trusted them and they've given you a prophecy before, and everything they've ever told you, you can trust is backed by scripture, et cetera, et cetera. I believe it might be time in America or Russia or Africa. That's the time when we see that the beast system is about to go online. It's not like I don't think anybody's going to be able to just say, okay, it's business as usual. Let's just stay at home and hunker down.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think it's going to become very apparent at that point. So, my hunch says that it's probably people in Jerusalem who are making it out somewhere toward Jordan, wherever that may be. That's my basic hunch.
Well, I agree with you there. I just think it's going to be larger. It's going to be like worldwide.
Yeah, I'm not disagreeing with that. There's a number of passages in Scripture that we get a sense, but we don't really have all the data. I mean, Isaiah 26 says, "Come, my people, enter your chambers and shut your doors behind you. Hide yourself, as it were, for a moment until the indignation is past." But of course, that's coming right after the resurrection verse. So, exactly when does that happen? Well, I don't know. Exactly where do they go? I don't know. Right? I mean, there's just all these questions.
It's funny you bring that up, because I differ with Tony and Steve Mutry on that issue. They see this as the resurrection. I see this as similar to a Paul harpazo, in which this man-child is caught up, whether in spirit or body, I don't know, and essentially given the same type of vision, same type of marching orders from Yah, and sent back down.
Okay.
Like, in other words, they're not just going to be floating up in the heavens like the pre-trib rapture people, having a party. I believe they're going to be commissioned to be sent back down with a job to do.
Interesting.
So, and that job is most likely to be to die.
Well, that's
where I differ with the two of them, because again, I can't get over that there's a first resurrection in Revelation 20, and they want to put a resurrection back at this stage. You understand what I'm talking about? So I'm
Yeah,
trying to be consistent with it. So I don't see this as
yeah.
a resurrection per se, just a harpazo, similar to maybe Paul's, and then commissioned, sent back down to be, I know we differ on the two witnesses, but to be witnesses
Yeah.
during this time period. So I'm sure even though you think I'm wrong, you would like that if there was 100, however many there are that are caught up and they're all telling the same story, and you're going, if you weren't one of them, and I'm not saying it has to be the 144,000, Doug. It could be a separate group. So it could be a more select group. It's not numbered.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm going to stick with Acts chapter 1. When he had spoken these things while they watched, he was taken up at Perthe, and a cloud received him. So he's taken. He doesn't just, he doesn't just use his Superman power. I mean, not that he couldn't, but I don't know whether he got a lift or he decided to float up by himself. I have no idea, but it says that he was taken up. So I think we have very similar ideas here I would just argue these are probably synonymous, and you don't have to have exactly one or the other. And it says that the same Jesus who was taken up from you into heaven will so come in like manner, right? So again, he's taken up into heaven, whether he's snatched like harpazo or he's taken up gently, I don't know. But it sure sounds like he's going to come back in the same kind of fashion.
In the clouds.
Well, yeah, and so again, that's where I think the verse is talking about Jesus' ascension after the resurrection. He's simply ascending. And this is giving us a very short, bullet-pointed perspective as to what's going on. So, all right, verse 7. Now war arose in heaven, Michael and his angels fighting against the dragon, and the dragon and his angels fought back, but he was defeated. And there was no longer any place for them in heaven. And the great dragon was thrown down, that ancient serpent who was called the devil and Satan, the deceiver of the whole world. He was thrown down to the earth, and his angels were thrown down with him. Ooh, I'll tell you. So we have a very clear identity of who the dragon is. It's Satan, the devil, right? All that. I don't think there's any discussion on that. Now this becomes a whole interesting thing. I've been doing a lot of writing as to how I understand this is going to happen. I think that Michael is the one who is standing in the gap. He is the restrainer that Paul talks about in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. And that when he's taken out of the way, that is when the man of sin appears. And I make the argument based on Isaiah 28, where it says that they're going to sign a covenant with death. I would argue that that covenant with death is basically a covenant with Satan, and that when Israel and the whole world finally makes this covenant with death, that is when Michael is out of a job. According to Daniel chapter 12, he is the one who stands watch over your people, and then there's going to be this great time of great tribulation, like there's ever been. And, a lot of people in Israel are going to die.
So do you believe this war is happening at the outset or right before the outset of the 1260-day period?
Well, I would suggest that the world is making the deal with death. Once they have inked that, whether it's ink or whatever, or spiritual ink, but they agree to the terms of this deal. And when that happens, Michael's authority base is gone. He just got the pink slip. He's out of a job, and he no longer has any basis for standing in the gap and being the restrainer. Now, I would also go to Daniel chapter 8, where it talks about the little horn who is going to make war with the powers in heaven. And he's going to get a little bit too big for his britches. And he thinks he can actually take on heaven. All right. So in Daniel chapter 8, verse 10, speaking of the horn, it's the little horn, and it grew up to the host of heaven, and it cast down some of the hosts and some of the stars to the ground and trampled them. He even exalted himself as high as the prince of the host, and by him the daily sacrifices were taken away, and the place of his sanctuary was cast down. Because of transgression, an army was given over to the horn to oppose the daily sacrifices, and he cast truth to the ground. He did all this and prospered. So I would suggest, because again, you guys know that I make the argument that Satan and the Antichrist are in many ways merged. The Antichrist is the avatar for Satan. And so, again, I don't know all the specifics here because I'm just trying to connect the dots like everybody else here. But what I see happening is that he kills the two witnesses. He is high on victory. He's taken his victory lap. He goes into the temple and says, I am God. Look, I just killed the two witnesses. And then he gets this bright idea. You know what? I'm going to go and chase down Michael because I just took away his job. And now I even have authority in heaven. Right. And so he is going to exalt himself as high as the prince of the host. I argue the prince of the host is Michael. I'm connecting dots there. He's making war against Michael. Now, this is where Satan, the Antichrist, overstep their bounds of authority. And while they do have authority on earth because humanity gives it to them, once they step into the spiritual realm, they don't have any authority. And that's where, they cross that boundary line and they get pushed back. And then now they're stuck down here on planet Earth for the remainder of the tribulation. So,
I think maybe Michael's standing down is he's been restraining, per 2 Thessalonians 2 and Daniel 12, like you mentioned, he's restraining, and he kicks butt, and he's thrown down, but he's told to stand down.
Yes.
Okay. Let him have his rule and authority.
Yep.
So I see this event happening at the outset or right before, we see the abomination of desolation that kicks off this 1260 days, this great tribulation.
Yeah.
That's when he's actually standing down.
So we're talking about a space of a couple days, and I've given a lot of thought. I've wrestled with it, exactly which one comes first. I don't know. I mean, this is where I think we get down to that 3-4 day window, and it's really hard to pin down exactly which one happens first, but they're all happening pretty close to one another. They're happening in conjunction with one another. They do seem to be, in some sense, dependent on one another, but I'm not sure which is the first domino. All right. But they're all related dominoes.
I mean, when you start talking about supernatural, although, it could happen like immediately. Like the stage could be set and he gets kicked out and he possesses the human being and becomes Satan's spawn incarnate, sort of like.
Well, and this is where I think we have to take it out of sort of the felt board, dispensational charts and all that stuff, and actually try to put some skin on it. Everything happens in time. It doesn't happen instantaneously. It can happen quickly, but there always has to be something set up. And the only weapon I argue that Satan really has against God is authority. And it's humanity that has to give him the authority, right? God makes the planet. He gives the keys to Adam. Satan comes along and says, hey, Adam, can I borrow the keys? And Adam's like, sure. Okay. And Adam gives away the authority. And once he's given it away, now God has to find a legal remedy for that. So when Jesus came and Satan takes him up on Mount Hermon, and he says, hey, just bow down, man, because all this stuff has been delivered to me and I can give it to whoever I want. He wasn't joking. That was a very real statement. Jesus had far more power than Satan. He could have smoked him at any moment, but the legal situation would have remained. All right. Just because Jesus had bigger muscles than Satan, it doesn't change the fact that legally there was still this big problem. And so Jesus had to do the legal solution, which is, of course, the cross. And this is where I would argue that mankind gets themselves in another bind because they make a covenant with death. And up heretofore, Michael has been kind of restraining some of evil's desires, not completely, but it's not going, like they don't have just, they don't have free reign, free will or free range, right? They can't just do whatever they want, whenever they want. There are constraints. And Michael, once he loses his legal authority because mankind votes in a new sheriff, so that's when he steps down, not because he doesn't have the power, but because his authority base is taken away. And this is when mankind is going to find themselves in a really big problem, because now they just voted for the devil and there's no way to get him out, right? There's no way to undo this, except for one thing, which is, of course, Jesus. And that's when the leadership in Jerusalem, when they finally cry out, when they finally say, Baruch haba b'shem Adonai, right? And Jesus talks about this. He says, you will not see my face again until you say, Baruch haba b'shem Adonai. He also talks about it in Matthew 24, where he says that because of the elect, those days will be shortened. I looked at that whole language there, and it's not just God like, well, I guess I'll do it for the elect. No, it's because of something that the elect do that will then shorten the days. And it's finally when the leadership of Jerusalem, those who are connected to that ancient Sanhedrin, they're connected to those ancient leaders who rejected Jesus, that same corpus now has to accept Jesus. And when they make their human declaration of who he is, that is when the days are shortened, which just happened to be 3.5 years. Okay. But, Satan was going to have a kingdom that was going to rule for 1,000 years or whatever.
Have you written
or even longer? But
have you written anything on that?
Pardon?
Have you said you studied it out, the language. Have you written any articles on that? Because I'd like to look at that. That makes sense to me.
Yeah. I mean, Crooked Image, Volume 3, it has that. I also am working on another end time series called Immortal Dawn. And so I've got part 1 done. I'm going to do 2 other parts to that. I'm writing shorter books nowadays, guys.
Yeah.
So instead of 100,000 words, I'm doing like 35.
I'm no Greek scholar, but I can look into it. But that interpretation, I've never even thought of that interpretation. It's because of what the elect do that those days are shortened and cut off. In other words, they do it on the 1260 day. I believe it says all hope is lost. They see the sign of the Son of Man.
Yep.
They look to him whom they pierced, and they cry out, and he saves. I mean, literally saves not the day. He saves the age.
Yeah, exactly. Saves the day and the age, and it all happens according to the chronology that he laid out. But nobody can see this when you're in the moment, right? Like it all just sort of happens, and it happens on the day that it happens. But in God's economy, it's all going to happen right on schedule.
And that's just one, like my friend Steve Mutria that I mentioned, like we align on this, but that's just one thing. He wants to say that the days are shortened or cut short, so he wants to take this 1260 days and turn it into a year or whatever. And I'm like, I can't do that. I'm like, that's too far out of the box for me.
Yeah.
But again, I respect Steve. I love talking to him.
Yeah.
I love bantering with him, having a show with him, and where we do differ, much like me and you differ, but it's not nasty differing. So
right. Yeah. Yeah, I think that resolves it a whole lot better. Let's keep going. We're
all right.
We're having so much fun here.
Okay, so let's see. Now this verse, okay, so the great dragon was thrown down, that ancient serpent called the devil, Satan, the deceiver of the whole world. He was thrown down to earth, and his angels or messengers were thrown down with him. This is something that in studying this the past few months, I never had seen. It's weird how, and I heard a loud voice in heaven saying, now the salvation and the power and the kingdom of our God and the authority of his Christ have come. For the accuser of our brothers has been thrown down, who accuses them day and night before our God. It's this is what's, I'm not saying I have this figured out, but the kingdom of our God have come. This seems to be at the outset of the tribulation, because we
Yeah.
see we see that when the dragon saw that they had been thrown down to earth, he pursued the woman who had given
Yep.
birth to the male child.
Yep. And it seems
So
to be contingent on going up into the heavenlies. All right. This is where I think basically, Satan hit the wrong button. He stepped over the line, and he got delusions of grandeur. This is where I think Daniel answers the question for us, where it says that he even exalted himself, right? So it grows up to the host of heaven, and it casts some of them down, some of the hosts and some of the stars to the ground and trample them. He even exalted himself as high as the prince of the host, right? So you get this impression that he overstepped his boundaries. Now, it may take 3.5 years for the solution to come, fair enough, but again, I think he pulled the wrong cosmic switch. And again, I think everything is legal based. I don't think it's just willy-nilly and God's like, okay, they've had enough, let's save the day now. Like, no, I really think that everything has to happen for a reason. It has to happen by a cosmic legal, God stuff that we may not understand, but there's a legal basis for everything. And I think that is the strategy that Satan has been operating under. Because again, he's not going to out arm wrestle God. But if he can, not even have to arm wrestle God and say, well, you can arm wrestle all you want, but I have a piece of paper here that says I have authority now.
What's I guess where I've been pondering says, now the salvation and the power and the kingdom of our God and the authority of his Messiah have come. And so it kind of goes back to what I believe about the two witnesses being two, but much more. Like this is not necessarily not all are going to be protected, not all are going to necessarily have these supernatural powers or anything, but there's going to be some it's not going to be the bloodbath for his children that are in repentance, and I believe they're going to have this power and this authority. I believe that's what happens during this time period. It's going to be biblical and supernatural. You're not going to win because you've got your AR-15s or AK-47s.
Well, there's something, I hear you, but there's also something significant because he's now cast down, because he no longer has access to God and he can't accuse them. Now, because that happened, now the next phase, whatever, can happen, right? And it'll have to play out in 3.5 years, but this was a significant milestone. Again, I think Satan, he just overplays his hand. He thinks he's got a winning hand, and it looks pretty good until he turns out God has a full house and he only had a whatever. I don't play the cards, so I don't know. But
and I don't believe this. But what I was getting at is the kingdom will this begin the seventh day? I don't think so. I'm just, again, this I never had seen this. I mean, I've read this chapter probably, I don't know, thousands of times since I was a little boy.
Yeah,
I've never seen that. Okay, now it says now the kingdom of God have come. I mean,
that's really interesting. It's really interesting because it does give you the impression that because this happened, now people who believe in Christ may have more power. We may have God's authority, God's power. I have a pet theory. I can't prove it, but my pet theory is that the reason that they will go to beheadings in the tribulation is because
they don't care.
People will have seen the ministry of the two witnesses. Whatever this verse means for this whole thing, but now they will have that authority to actually lay hands on people and resurrect them. And so where the beast system might be implementing death, the other believers come by and just resurrect these guys. So to make sure that they stay dead, they sever the head. So that's my pet theory. I can't prove that to you, but that's kind of how I see that stacking up there. So
I had just read over it until recently. So
yeah, and there's
it,
so many of those things, right? I mean, that's crazy.
and
I know.
and they have conquered them. So this is talking about those in covenant, those that believe in Yeshua and have the faith of Yeshua, and they have conquered him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony. They love not their lives even unto death. Therefore rejoice, O heavens, and you who dwell in them. But woe to you, O earth and sea. And I don't think that's talking about those that are saved and in covenant. I believe that's talking about the beast and his system and those who have rejected Yeshua. For the devil has come down to you in great wrath, because he knows that his time is short. And when the dragon saw that he had been thrown down to the earth, he pursued the woman who had given birth to the male child. But the woman was given the 2 wings of the great eagle, so that she might fly from the serpent into the wilderness to the place where she is to be nourished for a time and times and half a time. So the serpent poured water like a river out of his mouth after the woman to sweep her away with a flood. But the earth came to the help of the woman, and the earth opened its mouth and swallowed the river that the dragon had poured from his mouth. Then the dragon became furious with the woman and went off to make war on the rest of her offspring, on those who keep the commandments of God and hold to the testimony of Yeshua.
Yeah.
Stood on the stand of the sea. And then apparently
it's tricky, and so in Jeremiah it talks about people who are they're like a river, they're like waters. We certainly know in Revelation 17 it talks about the woman who sits on many waters, and the waters are people. So is this a literal bunch of H2O coming out from some source? Maybe. Or it could be that it's a bunch of nations or people that are now coming in hopes that they can destroy, this woman and her offspring. It's a tricky passage. I've wrestled with that one. I would tend to probably not think that it's an actual H2O kind of prophecy.
This has to be symbolic. I mean,
yeah, I would suggest
sort of like we agreed on the 2 witnesses. They're not fire breathing witnesses. But they can call down fire. Maybe Satan has some type of. But I think this is more about him pursuing the woman, like with wrath and trying to kill her.
Yeah.
And the only instance I can think of in Scripture where the earth just swallows up is Korah in the rebellion.
Yeah, so again, is the water symbolic, but the earth is actually the earth, and it actually splits open? Like, these are the big questions, and that's what makes it so challenging. It's like, well, maybe the earth really does open up, and a bunch of humans are killed, or maybe it's the earth opens and a bunch of water actually does go down there. But to say that it's easy is not
especially accurate. I mean, again, this is a book of symbols, and so
but not everything is a symbol, right? I mean,
not everything,
but a lot of stuff is a symbolic for sure. Yeah. And so now he's wroth with the woman, and he goes to make war with the remnant of her seed, which keep the commandments of God and have the testimony of Jesus Christ. So, this is certainly talking about believers. I've heard some Messianic believers say, well, this is only talking about Messianics. I don't know. I think most zealous Christians, even if they worship on Sunday, I still think they're by and large keeping the commandments. And I'll tell you what, as a Messianic pastor, I'm not keeping all the commandments correctly, like loving my neighbor all the time. Maybe half the time.
Daniel Botkin did a study on this. And I do believe that, Doug, that's going to be part of the testimony of the 2 witnesses. And I believe if your timeline is correct, they better be keeping Shabbat by then. They better not be eating swine. Because I can't get around what Isaiah 65 and Isaiah 66 say. Yep. He ain't happy with the swine and the meat eaters when he returns. I believe that the 2 witnesses' job role is going to be to both houses. In other words, to Judah, quit listening to the rabbis, follow the Torah, quit adding to and taking away, put your faith in Yeshua. Christians, hey, there's this thing called the Torah over there. Read it, learn it, start living it. You'll learn it like Acts 15:21 pagans. You'll learn the righteousness. And so I believe by this time, at this stage, okay, there's going to be no excuse. And those that refuse to repent and want to hold on to their traditions or hold on to their rabbinic or Christian traditions, I'll drive the bus over both of them. It's not going to look good. I don't believe they're going to be protected, Doug. Not saying they won't make it to the resurrection. I'm not saying they're going to be cast in the lake of fire, but they are not going to be protected. And again, not every I'm at 99.99% that not every person that believes in Yeshua and has faith in Yeshua is going to be the bride. I believe it's going to be a very, very small amount that's selected for the bride out of the whole house, of Israel. So I believe there's going to be a lot of these messianics and Hebrew uprooters like you're talking about. They're going to be looking around and saying, oh, my goodness, there sure are a lot of people in the kingdom. And there's going to be a lot of Christians looking around going, oh, I'm not the bride.
Yeah, I don't quite see it that way. I don't think the bride is quite that narrow. But I like a joke that I heard one time where this guy dies and he goes to heaven and Peter's showing him around and he's looking at all these different rooms and there's lots of people in each one of them. And he says, well, who's in that room over there? He says, oh, those are the Methodists. Oh, okay. And he goes to another room and like, well, who are those guys? Oh, those are the Presbyterians. And then he goes down the hall a little ways and they got this room and it's a little bit quiet down there. And he says, well, who are those people? He's like, shh, those are the Baptists. They think they're the only people here.
Well, see, the joke really, because at least the Baptists that I know, that actually applies more to the Church of Christ, because the Church of Christ is in their doctrine.
Yeah.
It is not in Baptist doctrine.
You can fill in the blank. You can put Messianics in there for all I care. I mean, I know tons of Messianics who think they're the only people that will be in the kingdom. And so I don't know. I think God is a lot more gracious than any of us can imagine. But well, let's get to some questions.
That's my part.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is the difference between being cast in the lake of fire or even if you're part of the first resurrection, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be chosen. I mean, you have the parables of the servants, you have this person was given 10 and he's got 10. He has authority over 10. This 5, he had authority. This person, it doesn't say that person isn't in the kingdom. He's probably going to be a ditch digger, maybe on latrine duty or something like that. But it doesn't say the wicked servant. It said calls him a servant.
Yeah, I tend to see I think we see a little differently on who the bride is. I know you have
I think it's a more
narrow perspective.
Very narrow.
Well, I mean, because the New Jerusalem is also called the bride, right? And there's 12 gates, and it's representative of all the different. Sorry,
don't go Sean Griffin on me.
No, I mean,
no, I'm joking. Yeshua is literally going to marry the New Jerusalem because it says New Jerusalem is the bride. So.
Well, it does. I mean, it does. But here's the thing: any city has 3 components. It has a location, it has infrastructure, and the most important part, it's got people, right? I mean, what is New York without New Yorkers? It's just a bunch of buildings, right? But people have to live somewhere, so you need buildings and it has to be in a place, right? So that's what I would see the New Jerusalem as. But
and I know we differ on that. I look at this being cast away, like the verse I just posted, about didn't we do all these things in your name? These people were, I don't believe these people are necessarily cast in the lake of fire.
Yeah.
They're not even making it inside the wedding ceremony. They're not even going to be a servant. They're not going to be a wedding guest. They're not going to be a bridesmaid. They're definitely not going to be the bride. I mean, it's you got 2 choices, Doug. Either they're lesser in the kingdom, or they're going to go to hell. So in my view on that respect is a little more liberal than yours. I'm saying that that it does not say they're cast in the lake of fire in the second death.
Right.
But they're definitely, I think this outer darkness thing, it's like, look what I could have been in New Jerusalem. I could have been ruling and reigning with Yeshua, and yet I'm not because I did not overcome this, or I was not doing this. And I'm not talking about someone who doesn't know any better about eating a ham sandwich, you know.
Yeah, and I'm certainly not condoning people for their ham sandwiches, but I don't know. I mean, I might get that one right, but I get other things wrong. So to
No, I
start
don't
saying
think
that,
I'm not
so and
condoning
so is
it.
keeping the commandments and other people are not keeping the commandments because they mess up on Sunday and they have ham. I just, I think this is where we become very selective. I
Well,
hear
you're
this
not.
all the time at the Way congregation and here in Denver.
You're
People are
not
like,
on the
well,
front.
what about those people that are sinning and they're not keeping God's commandments? I'm like, yeah, okay, what about them? Like, can you tell me that you're keeping all the commandments? Okay, you're doing Sabbath, you're doing clean eating, and you're keeping the feast. Good job. But are you truly loving your neighbor as yourself? I don't know. Are you doing the greater, the weightier matters of the law? And that's where I think we can become very snooty about this. And we can start saying, well, these guys aren't keeping the commandments. Well, if we take a microscope to anybody's life, we're going to see areas where they're doing well and areas where they are flunking. So I don't know. I don't want to get too snooty about who gets in and who doesn't, because I don't know. And I'm just glad that if I make it in.
Well,
But
that's
from
what
what God said, then I
sort
think
of
I'm
what.
in, because it's about grace and not about my works. And He's good, and
Well,
yet I do want to do the right thing. So
but it is about His grace, or else we would all be cast in the lake of fire. But
right,
faith is more than just an intellectual belief, as James points out, and that's why
yeah,
Luther hated the book of James, because it was
yeah.
too Jewish for him.
I'm not disagreeing with you.
I didn't. I
I just don't
mean,
have the answer, man.
I'm okay. I mean, I'm okay being an Uber driver. I'd rather be the bride, but I got a lot of overcoming to
All
do.
right, Christopher asks, do you
Listen
think
to this.
Revelation 12 is a rewind of the story from the beast perspective and then merges back with the full story on chapter 15? That's an interesting question. Well, I don't know if it's a rewind just yet, because we haven't even gotten introduced to the beast yet, right? That comes in chapter 13. But yeah, I think all of these are character sketches. That's how I tend to look at the book of Revelation. It's a bunch of character sketches. They're in a little bit of chronological order, but it's not hard and fast, and so you have this character sketch, you've got this character sketch, right? We had kind of a general overview of the situation of the environment on planet Earth. It's really lousy. Okay. And then we had a general character sketch of the scary creatures that come out of Revelation, or out of the book, out of Hades. Right. And then we had the character sketch of the two witnesses. We had the character sketch of the woman, the dragon, Michael, etc. In chapter 13, we're going to get the character sketch of the beast, but they're all overlapping in one way or another. All right. Now we can debate, exactly where does that overlap and happen and where does it stop? And does it go for 7 years or 3.5 years? I mean, those are the questions that perplex us, but they're all related. But these are just letting you see the characters in their part of the story and from their perspective. So it's related to 15. I don't know if it's necessarily a rewind though.
I put up this, and I've got to go to bed. I'm still catching up on sleep. Days that I
Okay.
missed sleep. So could the man child be the resurrected, raptured saints of God, including the wise verses of Matthew 25? That is what Tony and Steve Mutry would argue. I already know the answer for Doug. I'll just tell you. Doug says no. It's Yeshua, period, end of discussion.
Yeah.
I was nowhere near where Tony and them were until I want to say I read that verse. I actually saw where it talks about the kingdom of God comes. So that I'm not going to be dogmatic on it. I want to do some prayer and study on that. But it is, maybe that starts the millennium. It doesn't seem to be, but it's just weird. I'm fitting all these pieces together I don't think my dad invented this. It's like a big old jigsaw puzzle.
Mm-hmm.
And just when you think you got this piece fit in over here, you're like, this is causing a major problem with that
right.
understanding. And then
Yep.
this, like even when you start getting into some of the prophets and fitting them into a timeline, I don't think anybody has the perfect timeline or chart of how events will unfold.
Yeah.
And we just need to be ready to, like if there's great tribulation and before this great tribulation, I'm not caught up, and I don't know anybody that's just disappeared off the face of the, that I believe was a righteous person walking in covenant with God, and or I don't hear of any reports after they come back, and then I'm gonna go, man, probably was Yeshua, and that's why I don't like to be dogmatic about too much.
Well, and to carry the jigsaw puzzle analogy further, like that's why we at the beginning of this study on Revelation, we tried to lay out the basic framework. Okay, so we are generally futurists. We appreciate some of the historical stuff. We appreciate some of the idealism, but we're basically seeing this as mostly a futuristic event, or series of events that are going to come in the future. Okay, so that's our general framework. So that's kind of the border of our puzzle, right? And then we have a few faces that we have in there, but we're trying to figure out what's the relation. Does this face go next to this face, or does this bush go next to this thing, right? Like those are the things that we're working on. And like when we got to Revelation 11, the two witnesses, okay, I've looked at them for a long time, and I'm like, these are a huge part of this puzzle that most of the church said, put the two witnesses down in this little corner right here, and I'm like, I think they're front and center, and I think they are the cause for a lot of things. They're the catalyst for many of the things that happen. And of course, Scott and I, again, we're trying to put the puzzle pieces together, and I see the puzzle pieces fitting better if we have them getting their own 3.5 year period, and then the beast getting his own 3.5 year period. Scott makes the argument that no, they're both contemporaneous. They're both happening at the same time. I don't think the puzzle works that way, but okay, maybe I'm wrong. I mean,
I like your scenario and your puzzle fitting that way. I think it's better for it would work out better and give people time to repent. I just don't see it, because they get killed and it's the end. That's it. When they get killed, the resurrection happens, and that's the third woe coming, and that ain't going to be good for anybody. The second woe is over. So you've either got to ignore that, and we did that 2 or 3 weeks ago. So
yeah.
Hey man, I am so tired. I mean,
right.
I'm over here yawning like crazy.
Well, guys, thank you for joining us. I want to encourage you to get God's Divorce. You're going to love it. I promise you. You're going to like this book. It's on Amazon. It's audiobook. It's Kindle. So check it out and let me know. And if you get it, please do leave a review, because it really does make a big difference. My friend, get to bed. Everyone, thank you for joining us. We'll see you next week when we get into Revelation 13 and we get to discuss the beast and all that exciting stuff. Until next time, God bless you. Take care.